soon. Baseball season has been fantastic. We're already in the month of June. We're in the middle of it, and this is where things really start to kind of heat up. But joining us, of course, covering the Washington Nationals, and I had another one of a baseball mind as well that covered the Tigers, talking about youth movements and what we see right now currently in baseball, big markets, small markets, and of course, a lot of the middle of the pack markets. But joining us to talking a lot and showing off his natitude for the Washington Nationals, Ryan Clary. So when you think about the state of the NL East, I mean, the Phillies are just top-notch, chock full of talent. The Atlanta Braves lost their talent due to an injury. And then there's also a couple of those teams that are lingering from the outside coming in. So when you look at the Washington Nationals and the state of this, this group in the farm system, Joey Meneses, CJ Abrams, and I mean, there is a bunch of these young, promising players that I think Washington can get themselves right back up on track to building the confidence, building at least, the competitive nature. I mean, how have you really seen this covering the Nationals for as long as you have, and what the momentum train is looking like for them?
You kind of touched on it a lot there, Jake. And honestly, talking about this Nationals team, we went into this season knowing there was going to be a youth movement. And looking at CJ Abrams, he has kind of been that guy. And honestly, if you look at this offense, the offense is going to go as far as CJ Abrams will go. And I think Nationals fans, some people did expect that, but honestly, not really to this extent. Like in tonight's game, he's got a home run and a double going up against those Tigers that you were just talking about here. So CJ Abrams, I mean, he has kind of been the focal point of the Nationals so far. You even have a lot of starting pitchers who have come up through the system. Jake Irvin being one of those guys. He's starting in tonight's game as well, looking really good so far. Another kind of surprising guy has been left-handed pitcher Mitchell Parker, who looked really good in last night's game. This is someone who now has a sub-3.2 ERA on the season through his first 11 starts as a big leaguer. I mean, this is not something that you were really expecting. Then, of course, Mackenzie Gore as well, someone who is also in that Padres trade. I mean, the Nationals, they do have a nice little youth movement. And fortunately for us, there's going to be a lot more of that to come over the next year or so.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what, a lot of the youth, the many organizations that we know. I mean, when you got the Nationals who have, fresh from a title in 2019, which I thought was very remarkable in the way that they did it. I mean, People wrote this team off, and then they just caught fire the second that they ended up getting all the way to the World Series and winning it all. So when you think about, you got the championship on the belt, and then you start to think about, well, we've got some future pieces we really would like to build around. One in particular that I thought was pretty sneaky good to grab, and in the middle of that, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, Keibert Ruiz. When you get him from the Dodgers, I mean, in that trade that sent those two big-time players there, but there's some future promise with at least of it. I loved his play. I think he could definitely be a star catcher in the future, that a guy that could really show some promise, not in just the Nationals, but even for the National League in the future.
You know what? Keibert Ruiz, the one thing with him that's really kind of held him back is defense at this point. And, a lot of baseball people, they like to look at their offense. And even then, Keibert Ruiz's offense this year has not been good. And that has kind of been one of the things that are really holding him back, is staying consistent. I mean, 2 years ago, when he had his first full season up in the majors, he did show some promise. He got a lot better in the second half. Last year did look really good as well. Had an injury struggle there for a little bit during the summer, but Keibert Ruiz, the one thing that has kind of held him back is, again, that consistency part of this. And so far this season, he had a sickness that he was put on the IL for. He lost nearly 25 pounds over a few weeks. I mean, that is insane no matter what you look at, especially for a professional athlete. So Keibert Ruiz, I mean, he has struggled this year, but as you said, he does have the upside. He does have that power. He hasn't really necessarily been able to show that off all too much up to this point in 2024, but there is still a lot of promise. He's still young. He's still in his mid-20s. He signed an extension just last year. He's going to be here for the long run. And I think if Keibert Ruiz, if you were to find some way to just have some consistency in his game, in particular his offense, then this Nationals team would be a lot better off. And obviously, this team has not been all that bad this year. I mean, you're still in a rebuild. You're close to kind of getting out of that and really contending for a wild card spot. But still, this is still a rebuild. It's a youth movement. And Keibert Ruiz, he's going to be at the forefront of that. If you can get some consistent play out of him, especially on the offensive side of things, I think we'll be pretty good.
Yeah, and especially in a division like the NL East, when you start facing against Atlanta and Philadelphia, and I mean, we kind of already know what we're getting with the Miami Marlins, but in the end, this could very much be a team that I could see things go all well. You start moving up and in the ranks in the division. If they come out as a team that, they finish third, they finish second, there's some interesting stuff there. But when I look at the pitching staff, I mean, Patrick Corbin, veteran, he basically kind of serves as that guy that can be very vocal for a lot of these young guys, Mackenzie Gore. And even when I look at Jake Irvin, when you think of the pitching staff and what they are really kind of building and looking like, I mean, the starting rotation, it's going to definitely get there where it'll be deeper and it'll be a lot more consistent. But at least with the top guys, these are some guys that I think could very much show up and really play as well to their abilities.
You know what? Like, talking about the starting pitchers here, and, I kind of got into it a little bit in that first segment, but as you said, this is kind of something that the Nationals have really struggled with over the years. Like, you look back at the days with Steven Strasburg. Obviously, I could have developed that. Jake, you could have developed him as well. I mean, he was one of the better pitching prospects coming out of college in quite some time. You talk about another one with Jordan Zimmerman way back in the day. He was someone that the Nationals did develop, but they haven't really developed pitching since then. So now you start to see these guys come through the minors, go through the development process. And you're seeing guys like Jake Irvin. Cade Cavalli is another one of those guys who's a first-round pick back in 2020. Who's recovering from Tommy John surgery, who should be back up in the majors at some point this summer. And you see all these guys now coming up through the minor league system, being developed, and then also hitting the ground running in the major leagues. I mean, this is a huge development for a team that, number one, has not really spent that much money over the last few years. So if you're not going to spend money in free agency, what's the other way to do that? What is the other way to fill holes? Well, it's developing prospects, and that is what the Nationals have done. And in my opinion, it's been one of the better surprises of the 2024 season. Seeing guys like Jake Irvin really take a step up this year, Mitchell Parker come up from the minors, kind of really out of nowhere. If you're a big Nationals fan, if you really follow the minor leagues and you've heard his name, but even then, he was like your 20th best prospect. He comes up and he's looking like a front-of-the-line starter through his first 11 starts, and he did that yesterday against the Tigers as well. So if you're a Nationals fan right now, there's a lot of optimism out there, especially starting with the starting pitching. I mean, they have been the biggest surprise in really not even just the Nationals world. It's probably the biggest surprise in the NL East, the way that these young starting pitchers have really just pitched their butts off so far in 2024.
Yeah, and so when you think about it, because we do it every year. We vote on all-stars. We vote on some, guys that are going to represent, the clubhouse, in the All-Star game. So when you think about it with as far as all-star votes, and in your opinion with what you've seen with the Nationals, who do you think could very much be that top guy that is going to represent the Washington Nationals come the All-Star game?
I look at closer Kyle Finnegan right now. I mean, Kyle Finnegan last year at this time, there were some struggles, but a lot of people still believed in him. And he finished the year off really strong in the second half. And so far this season, he has been one of, if not the best closer in all of the National League at this point. I mean, he has been someone who is second in the NL in saves at this point. And again, he's going to continue to pile that on as the season goes on. Kyle Finnegan has been very good for this team. He was signed right before 2020. Not really many people heard about him too much. He was signed from the minors with the Oakland Athletics, came in, just kind of played his role as like a seventh inning guy, then kind of moved in the later innings as he kind of progressed through the major leagues. But so far, he has been the Nationals closer for the last two seasons, and he has been a very good surprise for this team. He's developed into one of the better closers in all of the National League at this point. You don't really hear about him too much because, again, the Nationals didn't have that many save scenarios last year compared to a lot of better teams out there, like whether it's the Dodgers. But I've always said this. If you were to place him on a very good team and he was going to be their closer, you'd be talking about this guy a lot more. He's got a sub-2 ERA. He's nasty with it. He's got a lot of different pitches that he can use back in his arsenal, and he has been probably the most valuable piece in this bullpen by far. And even then, if you look across the NL East at this point, he's probably been the best closer in the NL East, and that goes a really long way when you have a lot of different guys like Edwin Diaz for the New York Mets, obviously, a lot of different pieces, Alvarado for the Philadelphia Phillies. So he has been a very pleasant surprise. I do see him representing the Nationals at the All-Star Game in Arlington, Texas this year. That would be my vote.
Man, I think it would be great. And I'll tell you what, though, especially when you look at Major League Baseball and what it's really pivoted to, you can never not have enough relief pitching. I mean, these are guys that are like big time staples that really do help out. Yes, you can, again, with the development of the starting rotation is one thing, but when you've got bullpens, hey, I needed you to come in the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and then right there up at the 9th when it's very crucial, you got to find ways to deliver. And I mean, I just have always been amazed with closers like that can come in, execute, do the job, and really is like, that's the big staple for any team that you have.
Yeah, exactly. And, and as you were kind of saying there, I mean, you're only going to go as far in October as your bullpen will go. And going back and looking back at the 2019 Nationals team when they won the World Series, that bullpen was an awful bullpen, but they had a few pieces there where they could just kind of hang on to. And obviously they had the big starting rotation with Scherzer, Strasburg, and all the other different pieces. Patrick Corbin in that equation as well. A lot of different guys helping out from the bullpen, but you had Daniel Hudson, your closer, that you traded from that deadline. I mean, he was nails in the second half for the Nationals. You had Sean Doolittle, that proven vet who was the closer before Daniel Hudson, who got in there. He was nails down that stretch. You had a young guy with Tanner Rainey, who was nails in that postseason stretch as well. And again, Patrick Corbin at times in the World Series and as well as the NLCS come out of the bullpen and shutting the door and ultimately getting the win in Game 7 of the World Series. So your bullpen is an integral part of a postseason run. So let's just say if the Nationals were to make a postseason run at this point, I don't think they will. You'd be in pretty good hands because you do have some pieces in there like Kyle Finnegan, your closer, like Hunter Harvey, like Robert Garcia, who's been a left-handed pitcher, who's looked good. Dylan Floro, another guy who's had a lot of postseason experience under his belt as well with the Dodgers and the Twins. Those are all really integral pieces to a potential postseason run. And as you were saying, the bullpen, it means a lot in the postseason, and that's really what will get you to the World Series and beyond.
So we know right now, especially up in this month of June, is not only that we've got Major League Baseball play, but we've also got the College World Series that we know. Very fun, very exciting, and we've seen some promising pieces that can come in, build, develop, and turn into future superstars when the time is right. So we know right now that drafting and developing is such a big thing. I mean, we watch the NFL be so king when it comes to draft and development because these are guys that are ready to compete right now. And I know in baseball, it takes a little bit of time, but if you get through the tiers from, the single, the double, triple A, and onward to the show, I mean, that's where you really know there's some promise to the future. So when you look at the College World Series and then eventually when you get to the MLB Draft, have there been some future prospects that you may have kept an eye on that could be something interesting for the Nationals to really help to build through this draft and develop?
There are a couple different pieces this year, and for the Nationals specifically, I would probably go that pitcher route. There's one arm from Iowa, who I'm blanking on his name at this point in time, but there are a lot of different college arms this year, and you look at the guys like Chase Burns from Wake Forest, who's one of the top prospects this year's draft. You look even some prep bats, guys out of high school, Connor Griffin, who's not in the College World Series, but still, there are a lot of different prospects who will be on display so far in Omaha, but even kind of going further into it, the Nationals, if we're just making this national specific right now, they need arms. They need college arms because those are guys who are going to fly through the minors, get to the majors, help you out relatively quickly. And as we were kind of mentioning earlier, the Nationals, they're going through their rebuild process, but still they're not that far away from contention. So if we're talking about guys who can help them out, you look at Tommy White, another third baseman prospect out there. There are a lot of pitching prospects who will be in this draft as well. So at this point in time, I would look at college arms out there. Maybe the Nationals can kind of get lucky and have someone, whether it be a Chase Burns, fall to you at number 10 there. whether it be another guy, whether it's Jack Caglianone from the University of Florida who can help you out and fall down to number 10. I don't think that'll happen at this point. I don't think Chase Burns could happen either, but there's a lot of talent on display. And if you were to get one of those college guys into this system alongside Dylan Cruz, alongside James Wood, you're going to have a pretty bright future.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm like, watching the College World Series, I mean, good Lord. I mean, we're already in awe of what we're seeing right now with Paul Skeens. I mean, the fact that come from LSU and just a bright future as a pitcher, and he's already right now really turning heads with the Pittsburgh Pirates is something that's very unbelievable. But yeah, absolutely. Finally, before we move on to the segment is I've asked a lot of people that have covered baseball. I'm a baseball background guy myself. I mean, I've watched it and played it since I've been in diapers, and I've loved the game. I mean, I have grown long roots that are just endless. But when I think about, because, the game itself, we recently, and thank God that Angel Hernandez has retired. But when I start thinking about the quality of just the control of the game, because it's not easy being an umpire, a referee, because in the end, you're taking control of how you set the tone of the game at the end of the day. Now, we know, I mean, I'm looking at CB Buckner, I'm looking at a lot of these guys, and I'm like, what is with the strike, the strike ball rate right now? It's out of control. So when you think of right now trying to adjust a lot of those kinks that baseball's currently going through, I mean, how would you kind of summarize this in the best description? What baseball, we know, we love this game. There's a lot of history, but we also know that we are very open and willing to innovate. I know a lot of old heads don't like hearing that, but when you look at it in the landscape, how the game can be better, and I would say at the same time, kind of help a little bit more with the viewership side of things.
You kind of mentioned it there. A lot of people, I'm going to surprise you here, Jake. I am a young guy. I'm 24 years old, but a lot of people would throw out there, well, help grow the game, have better umpires, have the automated strike and ball system there. I'm against that. Some people are really surprised when I do say that. Now, here's the thing. Here's where I can kind of meet you in the middle with. I think you should have maybe five challenges to challenge strike and balls, whether it be an 0-2 count, and someone that's obviously a ball calls it a strike 3. You challenge that, you get the ball back, and then we all play ball. It's going to be that quick, really that simple. But overall, I think baseball, part of the theater of it, I hate to say this and I hate to admit it, I've said this out loud on my podcast, Locked On Nationals here, but I think part of the theater is having Davey Martinez, the Nationals manager, get in your face. And you know what? Baseball does kind of have an issue when it comes to getting highlights out there. And obviously, you got a lot of different star power out there. You have Fernando Tatis, Juan Soto doing his thing, but that's just kind of part of the game, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Some people hate to just kind of think that. They hate to admit that. And some might say, well, why don't we just look at Ellie De La Cruz and see what he does? And that can be the theater. And you're absolutely right. But ultimately, at the end of the day, people like that kind of face-to-face interaction. They do kind of like that theater behind baseball. And I think that's kind of the truth that people don't really want to hear out loud. And I'm a young guy. Again, I'm a forward thinker. But I also kind of think that is part of the game. And ultimately, there are a lot of bad umpires out there. That's where you got to start off first. That's the real issue. As you mentioned, CB Buckner, he's now going to have the spotlight on him with Angel Hernandez out of the picture. But at this point in time, I think a cool little inventive way you can kind of meet your baseball purists between your analytical forward thinkers like maybe yourself. I think we can kind of meet in the middle and just have a few challenges per game where you can challenge a ball or a strike and get the right call and then move forward. It'll be that simple. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you do go that route, if you do have the automated ball and strike system, it's not going to be the end of the world. We'll all adjust. And some people might say it's best for the game. We'll see.
I like that. I mean, honestly, that's a great nugget to save because, I'm the kind that I'm like, I was raised old school and, adjusting to new school technologies. But I've thought of this is if an automated strike zone, I would like it where I have some sort of device that even if I got to have it in my back pocket, where I can feel the vibration knowing that that's a strike. That was, I mean, technology is getting smarter every day. We got AI for God's sakes. But but when you think of it, it's hard to argue that. But yet where's the ball, where's the strike. But I like that thought of 5 challenges up on there. I think that's more than fair. And I think that really does, because I don't want to take the morality of the game away. I loved it when umpires are, they're getting hammered down their throats from managers, which is like, it was so entertaining. But yeah, hopefully we can figure this out because I love it. I mean, I'm going to my second Major League Stadium in Coors Field next Monday. So I'm excited to see, and I'll get a full picture of Shohei Ohtani there behind the dugout. So I'd like to see for myself how it'll be. But yeah, it's a theater. It's a show. I mean, that's the way you got to kind of look at it.
Like I was at a Nationals game last year when, I don't even know if you may remember this, Jake, but it was a big story around town. Davey Martinez, luckily enough, I got seats behind home plate. It was one of the coolest things ever. And of course, that was the game where Davey Martinez got on his hands and knees and was just barking with an umpire. Literally was on his hands and knees. If you look it up, I believe it was around this time last year. He was trying to, complain about a strike that was missed by him and for what he thought. Ultimately, it was a strike against the Nationals, and David Martinez was in the wrong. But still, that was part of the theater. You had all these different highlight clips being sent out about how David Martinez is laying on the ground, and it's part of the game, man. 162 games, that's a lot, man. Like, I'm a baseball fan. You're a baseball fan. We'll watch all 162 of whatever our team is. But for the casual fans out there, it's entertaining. It helps grow the game, and I hate to admit that, but that is kind of the hidden truth behind baseball that makes it a little bit more exciting. And even as me, a purist, it's kind of cool to see. I like to see Davey Martinez up in somebody's face. You want to see that momentum shift. And ultimately, guys ride off that as well. And I think most Major League Baseball players might say, like, hey, like, let's get all the calls right. That does make sense. But still, at the end of the day, it's entertainment. Davey Martinez on his hands and knees for arguing a ball and strike and trying to prove his point. That was one of the most entertaining things that I saw in 2023 from this Nationals team. And it was because you don't have an automated ball and strike zone.
Oh, 100%. The only thing that I'm missing up out of it that would have made it absolutely gold is when I get those grunt crawls when you're right there up on the ground.
Yeah.
Seen up on the mound. Just an absolute hidden gem. But Ryan, appreciate you taking the time, man. It was absolutely fun. Where can people find you and show off their attitude for those Washington Nationals?
So you can search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcasts, including over on YouTube. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. But again, just search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcasts, including over on YouTube. Hit that subscriber button. Jake, always appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we will see exactly what we'll figure out with the Washington Nationals come down the stretch, man. Take care of yourself.
You too, man. You have a good one.
Absolutely. Well, moving on from baseball.